This is Serbia. It's estimated that anywhere from 1.2 to 1.6 million people joined the protest in the Serbian capital of Belgrade. As if that number was not shocking enough, it's important to point out that Serbia only has a population of 6.6 million people. That means around a quarter of the Serbian population was protesting yesterday. They all came out against the pro-Russian president Alexander Vučić. His party has been in power for 13 years and he has been the president of the nation for almost 8. But now it seems his position in power may be numbered. So, how did all this start? Well, under Vučić's leadership, Serbia has become the second most corrupt country in Europe. This corruption was put on display for the whole country to see when in November last year, a newly renovated train station collapsed, killing 15 people in the process. In the years leading up to this incident, President Vučić and his party were going around the country bragging about how much money their administration was investing in the nation's infrastructure. That meant the public anger was directed towards those in power soon after this tragedy. Protesters took to the street, blaming government corruption for the collapse and calling for a proper investigation to find those responsible. This is where we need to talk about the role of the Serbian media in all of this, because a lot of the media companies are controlled and owned by people in the government, including President Vučić himself. Initially, the pro-government media took a very unique narrative, saying that accidents like this happen all over the world every single day, and there was no specific responsibility for the Serbian authorities to make sure this collapse didn't happen. Wow, I'm just shocked reading that. Clearly, this type of language just fueled the protesters' anger even more to get the answers behind who was responsible. They started pushing for documents to be released that approved this whole construction and renovation. Public wanted to see who was involved and how much they got paid. Unfortunately, for some reason, wink wink, this is a red line for the president. It has been almost 6 months since the collapse happened, and he still has not made the documents public. Before moving forward, if you guys can please hit that subscribe button down below to keep up with all the geopolitical news like this one. Let's begin. This brings us to our second point. Over the past decade, Serbia has gotten more and more authoritarian under the Vučić government. Their control over the judiciary and media has increased to an unhealthy amount in a democratic country. That's to say that people were already very unhappy with this whole situation, and the train collapse was the straw that broke the camel's back. Now, government is still refusing to release the proper documents, but independent investigations have shown that around 64 million euros were paid for the renovation alone, which is a gross overpayment. On top of this was paid to a Chinese construction company that was contracted to build the station as part of the BRI. If we just take that 64 million euro figure as to be close to the truth, then it kinda makes sense why government doesn't want to release the documents. Because based on public figures, it seems like that kind of money could be used to build multiple train stations from the ground up. And in this case, government paid that just to renovate one train station that ended up collapsing soon after it opened. Safe to say, Serbia needs some changes, and the protests have been going on for months to make that happen. Due to the public pressure, the Prime Minister of the country resigned just a few weeks ago, but he made sure to let everyone know that he's not admitting any guilt because it wasn't his fault. Rather, he's resigning to subdue the anger towards the government, that way both parties can work together to figure out a solution. But that resignation didn't work as planned, because soon after the Prime Minister resigned, this happened in the Serbian parliament. Now, this is not the only sign that the Serbia is not working as planned. Just 2 weeks ago, there was a resolution at the UN condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Serbia shocked the world when it voted in support of Ukraine, condemning the invasion. You see, the Serbian administration is a lot more pro-Russia than many of us would like, and that meant that this vote was shocking even to the Russians. But then we quickly got a clarification from the Serbian president himself. This was the statement he put out, and I quote, "I believe that Serbia made a mistake today. I apologize to the citizen of Serbia for that, and I take the blame because I was probably tired and overwhelmed." Now, this apology seems less towards the Serbian citizens and more towards the Russian dictator. Serbia later did change its vote, but I wonder if President Vučić is going to give the same option to the Serbians who voted to elect him. Anyways, all this brings us to yesterday, when the country saw one of the biggest protests in its history. More than 1 million people took to the street, and many had very specific demands for the president to step down.
I'd like to see a change, a regime change, but that is, as the English would say, a long shot, and it's difficult to achieve. But today we will demonstrate our dissent, to show how many people will be there, to show what we're striving for a normal state, a state of law, without corruption, lying, media pressure, persecution, expulsion, unjust sentencing, and so on. We're hoping for the best. What will happen? No one knows.
We've gathered in the streets primarily to express the discontent we've built up over the years of dictatorship, anarchy, and corruption. And I hope that this gathering will remain above all peaceful and dignified.
Now, President Vučić has tried many different ways to discredit the protesters, from saying that protests are being used by the opposition party in Serbia, to claiming that these protesters are being paid by Western intelligence agencies, when in reality none of that is true, because think about it. If Western agencies had the kind of pull to get 1 million Serbians on the street to protest against the president, then that president would not have won the election to begin with. But even though these statements are not true, they have played a big role in the protest. Many pro-government groups have started attacking the peaceful protesters after President's statement. In one instant, we even had someone drive a car straight into protesters, injuring one of them. Now only time will tell if President Vučić will step down or not, but the protest seems to be growing with every passing day. All the while, the Serbian people are trying to kick out a pro-Russian president. Other countries in Europe are also waking up to Russia's aggression. Here we have the president of the European Commission sharing the truth with the whole world. Putin has proven time and time again that he is a hostile neighbor. He will keep attacking, he cannot be trusted. Let's watch this clip.
Putin has proven time and again that he is a hostile neighbor. He cannot be trusted. He can only be deterred. And we know that Russia's military complex is outproducing ours. If we look at the military expenditure in real terms, the Kremlin is spending more than all of Europe combined. Europe's production is still on a lower order of magnitude. And beyond traditional capabilities, the range of threats that we face is getting broader by the day. I know that the European Parliament argued for years that Europe needs to do more, and you were absolutely right. And this is more dangerous today, the era we live in, so Europe really needs to step up.
I think this statement just hit too close to home for Russia, because we had the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov come out hurling personal insult towards the president of the European Commission. This is how you know they're losing the argument, because they start attacking the person instead of the argument.
Führer Ursula is mobilizing everybody, everybody to remilitarize Europe.
Now, it's kind of ironic that Russia is worried about Europe mobilizing more people, when in reality, Russia has an army of 1.6 million people, while Russian population is only 140 million people. On the other hand, Europe has a population of more than 500 million people, and its army, the combined army of all European countries, is only 1.5 million personnel. So Europe has a smaller army even when its population is almost 3 times as big as Russia's. Going back to that famous saying, people lie, numbers don't, Russia clearly has a much bigger army because it's the aggressor. Putin wants to rebuild the Soviet Empire, and that's why he's using every man he got in the country. Next up, we have the Russian propaganda, Kremlin TV, spreading Putin's point of view. This is where it's important to point out that history is any proof, we have to remember. Once they tell them who they are, believe them. And we know the Kremlin TV gets their talking points straight from Putin, straight from Kremlin themselves. And here we have Kremlin TV telling us exactly what Putin wants. Any Russian war ends with few obvious results, one of them being the partition of Poland.
One thing is certain here. Macron is following a path well known in the 1930s that leads to only one thing. Any war with Russia ends with a few obvious results. The partition of Poland. And the fact that a Russian soldier ends up in the capital of a country that has decided to go to war with Russia. The only thing, I appeal to my comrades' descendants because things happen. Please don't leave. Do not repeat Gorbachev's mistake this time. If we have reached and planted a flag, we have to stand until the end. No goodwill gestures. It was a bad idea for Khrushchev to make a goodwill gesture to Finland back then. And, to this day, we all are confronting the consequences of what Gorbachev did, and Yeltsin.
Rhetoric like this is exactly why Poland wants to increase its military spending even more. As of now, Poland is already one of the highest spender in NATO, spending around 4.7% of its GDP in defense. It also has an army of 220,000 personnel, making it the third largest army in NATO, only behind United States and Turkey. But Poland is realizing that this may not be enough, especially when fighting a force of 1.6 million Russians. That's why the Polish Prime Minister has decided to increase Poland's army size to 500,000 personnel. And he has also announced that Poland wants to make sure that every single adult male in Poland has gone through military training and is ready to take up arms whenever that Russian invasion comes. Last 5,000 years of history have shown us that the best way to avoid a war is to prepare for it, and Poland is preparing for one. Poland has also announced that it's now seeking the nuclear option. Here's the Polish Prime Minister announcing this.
Poland must reach for the most modern capabilities, including those related to nuclear weapons and modern unconventional weapons. Therefore, we are facing a very serious race, and this is a race for security, not a race to war.
And the reason countries are in such a hurry to make sure they prepare for a Russian invasion because of Russia's rhetoric when it comes to the ceasefire. Everywhere from the Russian foreign minister to Russian MP to Vladimir Putin himself, they keep saying that Russia doesn't need a ceasefire, Russia will keep going, Russia does not want to stop the killing. That kind of rhetoric is not coming from a country that wants peace. They want to take over the world, they want to rebuild the Soviet Empire. And that's exactly why they don't want this war to stop. Here again we have the Kremlin TV sharing the Russian point of view.
People are going to get killed, lots of people.
So we are now smashing their faces, and then we say, now let's have a pause so they can pump you with weapons and intelligence so that in 30 days you can hold us back or something. Well, I can say more. Now, Witkoff, I want to note that they signed it. Do you understand? They finished the press conference and stated that. One thing is clear. They figuratively signed it. Yes. Yes. What they are saying now, and what's important, is that Ukraine forced America to go back to supplying it with weapons and intelligence data, which, judging by the strike on Moscow, it never stopped doing. Therefore, one thing is clear here. Our tasks are set by the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, and we will fulfill them. We are deeply indifferent to what these people have agreed upon. And for those who thought that Trump will come and everything would be fine for us. Number, not fine. But this, by the way, don't lose your minds. In fact, this is already a failure of the peace plan. Russia has only two allies, the Army and the Navy, and our secret trump card is the Strategic Missile Forces. Therefore, we are calmly and systematically solving the tasks set by the Supreme Commander-in-Chief. Well, by the way, let me remind you that all this has no meaning at all. This is just the beginning of a long negotiation process.
Lastly, as you guys know, over the last 2 weeks, few of our videos have been demonetized by YouTube for talking about sensitive topics and covering violent events. This is why recently we opened up memberships on the channel. This way you guys can directly support our content. Again, you don't have to do it. We'll continue making the videos, but if you enjoy the content and you're able to support us, you can do so by signing up for our membership. It costs less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks and it's greatly appreciated.
For the first time, senior U.S. officials confirmed that North Korea is sending troops to Russia.
There are now at least 10,000 DPRK forces in the Kursk Oblast.
North Korean soldiers are executing Russian soldiers and indirectly helping Ukraine win the war.
Why would North Korea do this?
The Russian army is suffering its highest casualties since it invaded Ukraine. Is Putin running out of soldiers to keep his war going?
On December 14th, Ukraine's military intelligence agency reported that during a skirmish along the front lines in the Kursk Oblast, a group of North Korean soldiers opened fire on vehicles carrying members of the Chechen Akhmat unit who were fighting for Russia. As a result of this friendly fire incident, 8 Russian soldiers lost their lives. This likely happened due to miscommunication or sheer incompetence, but either way, it's a bitter pill for the Russians to swallow. After all, they're now getting a taste of what it feels like to be betrayed by their own forces. And let's be clear, this isn't the first time Russian soldiers have died at the hands of their so-called comrades. There are even more disturbing and bizarre stories that reveal how far the bloodlust within Russian ranks has gone. In fact, just 2 days ago, on December 22nd, Russian forces were caught on video executing 5 Ukrainian prisoners of war on the front lines. A drone operator from Ukraine's 110th Separate Mechanized Brigade, named after Marko Bezrukko, captured the execution on video. The footage shows Russian troops surrounding a building where Ukrainian defenders had been holding their position. With no way out, the Ukrainians decided to surrender. They came out of the building with their hands up, clearly signaling their intent to give up. They even lay down on the ground, completely defenseless. But then, in an act of pure cruelty, the Russian troops opened fire on the unarmed prisoners. Ukraine has vowed to report this war crime to the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross. Officials declared that Russian war criminals who execute Ukrainian prisoners of war must face an international tribunal and receive the harshest punishment allowed by international law. But the heartbreaking thing is that this isn't even the first time something like this has happened. There are countless other stories of Russian forces committing these kinds of atrocities, targeting not just Ukrainian soldiers, but civilians too. Before we go any further, do us a favor and drop a like. It's quick, and it helps us keep bringing you updates like this. Alright, now first let's focus on the North Korean soldiers and see how they've been unintentionally helping Ukraine. At $5 billion for 11,000 to 12,000 North Korean soldiers, it was no small investment for Vladimir Putin. For that kind of money, Russia was undoubtedly hoping these troops would provide at least some kind of advantage on the battlefield. Instead, they've become more of a liability than an asset. Their lack of training, language barriers, and now even instances of friendly fire have made them more of a headache for Russia than a help. Similarly, the involvement of North Korean soldiers in this war has also triggered a significant reaction from Ukraine's allies, especially the United States and NATO. Until recently, the West was cautious about escalating the conflict and had been limiting its support for defensive systems, mostly avoiding actions that might provoke Putin into desperation. For example, long-range missile systems like ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles were provided to Ukraine under strict conditions. They could only be used to defend Ukrainian territory and not strike targets deep inside Russia. But Putin's decision to internationalize the war by bringing in foreign troops changed the West's perspective. The first major shift came from the United States. In November, The Biden administration authorized the first use of U.S.-supplied ATA-CMS missiles to strike inside Russian territory. ATA-CMS could be equipped with unitary warheads, cluster munitions, penetration warheads, and much more, making them effective against multiple targets like enemy forces, air bases, bunkers, and logistic hubs. This decision became a turning point in the conflict because these missiles, with a range of up to 190 miles, gave Ukraine the ability to target hundreds of high-value military sites that had previously been untouchable. Seeing this, the UK and France also lifted restrictions on their Storm Shadow and Scalp EG missiles. These weapons, essentially the same in design and capability, are known for their precision and ability to penetrate fortified bunkers and underground military installations. So Ukraine wasted no time and used a couple of Storm Shadows to strike Russian command posts and ammunition depots in the Kursk region. On November 20th, Ukraine launched a devastating strike that targeted the headquarters of the 35th and 27th Separate Motor Rifle Brigades, along with the 2nd Combined Arms Army of the Russian Armed Forces. According to Ukraine's general staff, these command posts were heavily fortified, which made them the perfect targets for the British-supplied Storm Shadow missiles. But this attack had far more consequences for Russia beyond the physical destruction. You see, these command centers were playing a critical role in Russian military operations that were trying to push Ukrainian forces out of the Kursk region. Russia had gathered an enormous force of around 50,000 soldiers, including thousands of North Korean troops. The plan was to carry out large-scale attacks on multiple fronts and regain as much Russian territory as they could. They'd also use the North Korean troops along with them. Until this point, they had undergone only minimal training, but were still sent with Russian troops, so that they'd get on-the-job experience and adapt to the brutal realities of modern warfare. But then Ukraine struck. According to pro-Russian war bloggers, Ukraine used up to 12 British Storm Shadow missiles in the operation, and the results were catastrophic for Russia. The strikes reportedly wiped out 500 North Korean soldiers who were stationed near the command centers, including a high-ranking North Korean general sent to oversee the operations of the special units. This single strike was a massive blow to Russia's operation in the Kursk region. Losing such a significant number of soldiers, officers, and key figures in one coordinated attack was not just a tactical failure, but also a symbolic defeat. This devastating strike on Russia's command centers set them back for days. But despite this major blow, Russia remained determined to push forward with all 50,000 soldiers deployed in the Kursk region. They kept up their relentless waves of attacks, but without the crucial support of their now destroyed command centers, these assaults quickly descended into chaos. Poor coordination, insufficient communication, and a continued reliance on outdated tactics made it easier for Ukrainian forces to counter the attacks effectively. In the weeks that followed, the toll on Russian and North Korean troops has been overwhelming. Reports indicate that dozens of North Korean soldiers have been losing their lives every single day. On December 17th, a senior U.S. military official disclosed that North Korean fatalities alone have risen to several hundred, with thousands more injured. At the same time, Russia's overall casualty rate has stayed at equally devastating levels, with as many as 1,200 Russian troops being killed or wounded daily. This is exactly why incidents like friendly fire feel like such a punch to the gut. And honestly, this isn't surprising. Russia's doing next to nothing to properly train these soldiers, especially the North Koreans, so they can work together effectively. The language barriers, lack of modern warfare experience, and rushed deployment make situations like this almost inevitable. For example, here's another bizarre incident where a North Korean soldier ended up shooting his own comrade while trying to take down a kamikaze drone. The drone footage shows two North Koreans standing in a snowy field of dried sunflowers when a Ukrainian FPV drone suddenly flies towards them. One of the men panics and starts firing at the drone, but instead of hitting his target, the bullets go straight into the body of his comrade, who happened to be in the line of fire. This footage is from Kursk, and it really shows the panic on the soldiers' faces, highlighting just how poorly they've been trained. But you know what? It's hard to blame them entirely, because this is how Russian and North Korean soldiers are being taught to handle enemy FPV drones. They're told to dodge, run, or In some cases, just stand still and hope that the drone doesn't notice them. It's as absurd as it sounds. And as you might guess, these techniques rarely work. Even in the rarest of cases, it would require an incredible amount of luck to come out alive without a scratch. This is due to the incredible speed at which the FPV drones operate, not to mention that Ukraine specifically builds its drones for speed, flying at rates that can reach anywhere from 50 to 100 miles per hour depending on the model and explosive payload. On top of that, these drones are incredibly precise and guided by experienced operators. Clearly, when it comes to drones, there's no luck or guesswork involved here. They are designed to hit their targets, plain and simple. On the other hand, the soldier on the ground is left relying on pure luck and split-second decisions, just hoping the drone doesn't follow the direction he's dodging. But then, there's the payload. You see, these drones are often armed with DIY explosives, rigged with sharp metal objects like nails, blades, or shrapnel. So even if the drone misses its primary target and hits the ground nearby, the resulting explosion creates a wide damage radius with a high probability of causing severe injuries. Soldiers caught in the blast are often immobilized or incapacitated, making them easy targets for a follow-up strike. And Ukraine doesn't hesitate to send in another drone to finish the job if the first one doesn't succeed. But yeah, there are rare incidents where this type of training does pay off. For instance, in one video, you can see a Russian soldier baiting a drone and dodging at the very last second before walking away seemingly unscathed. He might have been the luckiest guy at that moment, but what most of you don't notice is the price of that luck. His comrade, lying next to the blast site, had lost his life to a drone strike just moments before this one. So sure, the drone dodging training work, but it's more like 1 in 100, maybe even 1 in 1,000, where someone manages to walk off unharmed. But then what about Russian FPV drones? Well, unlike the Russians and North Koreans, Ukrainian troops are trained and equipped with not just one but a variety of effective strategies to counter Russian drones. For example, their mode of transport often involves armored vehicles or modified buggies, which are not only fast and nimble, but also come equipped with multiple automatic weapons mounted on a light chassis. These vehicles are specifically designed to handle drone threats, giving Ukrainian troops a significant edge. Many of these vehicles also carry advanced signal jamming equipment that can disrupt the communication between a Russian drone operator and the drone itself. By severing that link, the drone is rendered useless, often causing it to crash or lose its target entirely. If soldiers are on foot near the front lines, they're equipped with specialized anti-drone guns. These devices use directed radio waves to overwhelm the connection between a drone and its operator. By interfering with the signal, the gun can cut the drone's video feed, forcing it to either return to its takeoff point, land immediately, or drift aimlessly until it crashes. But what if a Ukrainian soldier doesn't spot the drone in time? That's where the anti-drone backpack comes into play. This device creates a protective shield extending up to 700 meters around the soldier. Equipped with 2 protruding antennas, the backpack actively disrupts the connection between Russian drones and their handlers, causing the drones to fall short of their intended targets. Whether the drones are scouting or armed, this technology significantly reduces their effectiveness on the battlefield. One of the biggest reasons Ukraine has managed to bring Russia to its knees is its remarkable ability to improvise and innovate on the battlefield. Even when they lack advanced technology, Ukrainian forces find creative solutions to level the playing field. For example, some Ukrainian forces have been known to stack multiple AK-74 rifles together, rigging them to fire simultaneously at drones. This clever tactic significantly increases the chances of hitting and bringing down an enemy drone, especially in scenarios where more sophisticated counter-drone equipment isn't readily available. For Ukraine, every life matters, and that philosophy drives their relentless push to adapt and protect their soldiers. But what about the North Korean soldiers? I mean, how do they react to all of this? What goes on in their minds? Are they scared? Do they even know what drones are? Or are they just as disconnected and robotic as they're often portrayed? Most importantly, How do they behave with their Russian counterparts, and how are they treated in Russian camps? Well, up until now, we've had little to no insight into all of these questions, but that has just changed. 2 days ago, a captured Russian soldier shed some light on how things really are. According to him, the North Koreans are actually treated far better than the Russian troops. This privilege extends to everything: what they eat, how they're trained, and even the overall attention they receive. The captured soldier revealed that both North Korean and Russian troops are fed twice daily, but there's a stark difference in the meals. While the North Koreans are served eggs, chocolate, and even coffee, the Russians are left with barley porridge. It's clear that there's a deliberate effort to keep the North Koreans in better shape, likely because they're seen as an expensive investment for Putin. But there's more. The Russian soldier described the North Koreans as not right in the head. According to him, they never smile, act harshly, and seem completely devoid of humanity. He said they shoot at everything: drones, shadows, anything that moves, without stopping to check if it's Ukrainian or friendly. This behavior could explain incidents like the recent friendly fire and the drone mishap where one North Korean soldier accidentally shot his comrade. The situation is so chaotic that even the Russians are unsure whether these troops are trained or not. According to the captured Russian soldier, opinions vary widely. Some believe the North Koreans are well trained, while others think they're reckless, untrained, and completely unaware of where they even are. He also mentioned that the North Koreans actively avoid interacting with Russian troops, which makes sense given the language barrier. When they first arrived, the North Koreans were given a crash course in Russian. This training consisted of a list of around 100 basic words and military terms like fire, cover, and in position. But let's be honest, it's impossible to memorize an entirely new language in a few days, especially when you're being thrown into the chaos of war. They were handed a piece of paper with the terms, but then again, who has time to consult a cheat sheet when bullets are flying?